well out there. It's really cool to see so many people engaged with the future of Fuse Network. So today you're here with myself, Ian Kane, and some key members of the Fuse team. And we're here to tell the community about what we've been up to over the last couple of months and how it's going and what's coming soon. So guys, how are you doing today? Rob, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic, thanks Ian.
Nice. Carl?
Yeah, wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Nice. The guys are in good spirits. That's always a good start. All right. So what are these calls all about, guys? So community calls are kind of standard in the crypto industry, but that doesn't mean that we're just going through the motions here. We have a real thirst for transparency, and we want to hear our community feedback. After all, we can do so many things, but if you guys don't like it, then, what's the point? So we've been heads down for quite some time, and it's that time of the month when we raise our heads out of the sand for a moment to tell you what's going on at Fuse. And it also offers people an opportunity to ask questions. So if anybody out there is watching, you've got a question, fire it into the chat. We'll do our best to answer the questions. Please remember we can't answer all of them, and also listen up. We may cover the answer in our chat at the beginning. So before we kind of jump into our updates for Fuse, I know that Rob's got some thoughts he wants to share, and that we also echo here at Fuse. And we've seen a lot of changes over the last kind of decade, Rob, I would say. Tell us how you see the landscape as it stands today.
I think we're in a really interesting place. Like you say, it's been 10 years now, 2008. So since Bitcoin was initially created, it's been 14 years technically, but 10 years that we've really started seeing this technology, take off and become more prominent. Bitcoin proved essentially that it was possible to create a decentralized financial system, right? The sort of proof of concept that it was possible to create something that allowed us to take, finance out of the hands of centralized entities in a sense. So we saw the first big cycle, right, in 2013. 2017, we saw the Ethereum cycle, programmable money, VC disruption, essentially. We saw bankers falling out of their chairs in 2017 when the ICO craze took off, and the global market cap of crypto reached almost $1 trillion. And then, of course, more recently in 2020, the DeFi boom, which has been huge. 2021, the NFT boom. The thing that excites me right now, especially where the economy is and the sort of the global sort of macro situation, I really strongly believe that mainstream adoption is right around the corner, early majority adoption. And I believe that payments is the thing that's going to drive that. There's been some really interesting reports come out recently. Payments.com in particular did surveys with around 3,000 merchants and businesses. Over 85% of companies with more than $1 billion in annual sales are saying they're innovating with cryptocurrency. And we're also just generally seeing a lot of adoption of crypto amongst retail. Depending on the figures you're looking at and the type of adoption you're seeing, at the high end, around 200 million people globally. These are people that are sort of dipping their toes, if you like. And then if you're looking at the more experienced users, people who are using DeFi and using less of the Binances and the Coinbases, etc. of the world, around 30 million people. That can grow very quickly, right? We could very quickly be around 1 billion people globally. And that is mainstream adoption. And that's what makes me excited, essentially, because I believe that with that trend, we could very quickly start to see global sort of mainstream adoption of payments, of crypto payments.
For sure. Like I said, we echo these thoughts. We agree entirely. And it is a really interesting time right now. I think a lot of people, perhaps this cycle is potentially one of the most interesting I've been involved with. I think the mindset is different right now, and we're closer than I think we've ever been to kind of mainstream adoption. And yeah. So thank you, Robert, for that. That's our kind of high level overview and kind of what we're thinking about right now at Fuse. So we're going to jump into the next section, which is to talk about the kind of partnerships and integrations that we've been working on here at Fuse during August and then into early September as well. So Carl, do you want to jump in and tell us about what you've been up to and what's going on with Fuse over the last couple of months?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm sure it's not lost on anybody on the call that we're in a difficult market. It's a bit more complex than it has been. Like Ian and Robert said, it's quite an interesting cycle. We're closer to mainstream adoption than we've ever really been. We'll just have a cooling off period, I think. It's not the first time. We've all been through it a few times, once or twice, depending on who you are and where you've been through. But we understand that, right? And so we're here and we're trying to work out how to build things and move forward and create kind of the next sustainable level of growth for Fuse. So in terms of partnerships that we've brought on board for that, one really super important partnership that we've closed off is Chainstack. Chainstack, similar to an Infura style provider, more centralized. And if you think about this in the context of when the internet first started, and you had a concentration of ISPs, and then later on, as it evolved, it became more open. We're in a similar situation now, where kind of these publicly operated node operators are out there. We're looking for good partners, strong partners to help us scale. We can't do everything ourselves, and so Chainstack are going to give us that option to provide test nodes or free node options for the developers who want to come and test and try out the network. Also, it makes it very composable for developers that are cross-chain already and come over to join the network as well. And then there'll be activities as well in the future where, as Fuse, when it's the right time, opts to undertake hackathons. Chainstack will be a partner in that and look to provide free services during that period to help the partners.
Nice. That's a good integration then to help our developer community achieve better tooling. So what else is happening on the kind of integration side of things?
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about the ones that we do officially, but I think there's also super interesting things that happen on the network, without direct interference from the Fuse team, as it were. Right? We have projects like Flux Swap, or Fuse Spaces, or something else that would allow. Flux Swap would allow limit orders, for instance. It's not the first time we're getting limit orders. We have Open Leverage coming this month, I believe. Open Leverage will come this month, and they will be launching. Just 1 second. I don't have any background noise. I don't know if one of you have got some echo.
Might have a bit of a background.
Yeah, a little bit of a background noise there. No worries. We'll carry on.
That's much better.
Yeah, excellent. Sorry about that. Could just hear myself back. I was losing my trail of thought. Yeah, so I was saying, we have Flux Swap. They've just put limit orders live on the Fuse network, so that's the plus of the Fuse network. And then we've got Open Leverage coming to the Fuse network soon. Open Leverage are going to be providing. They actually did an AMA with Ian as well, right? So that they're going to be providing leverage swaps. So they'll leverage voltage and give you the ability to do margin trading on DEXs, which is quite powerful. I guess we had a small setback with lending at the moment, but we're working on lending partners to come back on board as well.
Yeah.
And then this is purely from the DeFi side, and then just to kind of go back to core team and understand where we're at. We had the Fuse Charge launch, and Fuse Charge is predominantly around developer tools, right? It's there's that famous thing that the CEO from Twilio said when they were trying to work out how to market their product, and they say, "Oh, ask your developer," right? And I think that with Charge, when people are trying to explain it or understand it, I think the best way to understand it is to ask your developer, as it were, right? So they're going to provide those services, those level of microservices that will help people build better on the blockchain. So Web 2 services, or existing Web3 services, removing a lot of the complexity to do more interesting things around ramping, off-ramping that will come through. And that's where it kind of, to go back to my original point around sustainable growth and building, and to Robert's point about the next wave, we really want to begin to drive towards real world usage and sustainability to transaction across the blockchain. That's where we see. If you think about just a general, like an SMB, for instance, and their retail transaction base is you're talking in the hundreds of thousands per week across all of their different businesses. Beginning to leverage those, beginning to get a few of those key partners as we go through will really take us to a place. So we're working on partnerships at the moment with T1 technology providers, looking for hardware integrations. Just trying to advance it in this way, looking for real world opportunities that we can bring onto the blockchain and go there.
Nice. All right, thank you, Carl. Nice one for that. So that's our kind of partnerships and integrations update and what we've been working on over the last month. So what we're going to jump into now is the marketing and communication side of things. So partnerships and integrations are absolutely important. And then now we're talking about what we're doing out there to communicate with the wider world and how we're getting our message out. So I'm going to join in with this one too. But Rob, kick us off with some what's going on with events. I know you're at some events. What's happening?
Yeah, we've been doing lots of events recently. The big one that's happening next is the event of the year, in a sense, for us is Singapore. So Token 2049, a big event, big, you know, the biggest, blockchain crypto event in Asia. A lot of institutional interest at that kind of event. I have been before personally, back in 2019. And then we also attend, I mean, the team is out there a lot. I'll also be in Vietnam next week. There is the Bwiddle Asia event taking place around the 23rd of September. I'll be there with a couple of Fuse colleagues as well. And then, I mean, generally we've been out there in general, right? We're in Texas in June for Consensus. We were in Miami back in May for Permissionless, the Blockworks organized conference. The development team, our tech team will be in Berlin next week for there's an important Berlin crypto conference. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a very important developer conference in Berlin. So typically we can be at up to two, 3 conferences a month. You know, in terms of the team members, we're generally quite out there. There's also a lot of conferences, of course, with our headquarters being in Tel Aviv. We do sort of 3-4 events there per year. So yeah, a lot of events. These are great opportunities to be speaking with, you know, blue chip technology partners. You know, on the sort of more high end sort of type partnerships you might do. So sort of blue chip technology partners, speaking to the likes of, you know, the Googles, the Amazons, the SAPs, the Samsungs of the world, and seeing what kind of design partnerships we can come up with there. And then, of course, speaking to the enormous amount of integrators that we can be bringing onto the network. Speaking, of course, to institutional investors, etc. So it's great to be out there at these events and networking and making connections.
Yeah, definitely. It's an important part of the job, right? Get out there, be seen, make connections, shake hands, and be visible as well. I think it's very important. So if anybody watching is going to be at any of those events that Robert mentioned, then yeah, feel free to book a slot with him or reach out. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation. So on the other side of these things, so we're talking about marketing and communication. So I'm going to dive into what I've been kind of assisting the team at Fuse with, and what I've been working on. So the Fuse content is having a bit of a reshape. We are working extremely hard right now to create new types of content and new content flows. So one of the big things we're doing is releasing a native blog. So all of our content up till this point was held on the Medium platform. We're migrating that over to an in-house blog. So we're going to handle our own business there. This creates a more functional structure for the blog and a better user experience, in honesty. And it allows us to move people around our content, so we can make sure that you're learning the most important things for where you started your content journey, basically. So more content overall, that's a big thing for us, generating more content and more reasons to kind of interact with Fuse and learn more about Fuse as well. So a big part of that is something that we're starting called the Fuse Academy, which is a written content mission at the moment. And that is to bring more awareness to our community and the broader community about what is blockchain, what are smart contracts, what are NFTs, what are these things that everybody's talking about that perhaps a lot of people don't understand. So we're bringing those things as well. And then also, because the blog will come into the website, we're making some updates to the website. It's not been prioritized for quite some time. And we're going to put a big focus on creating sort of user experiences on the website. So you imagine that the website kind of divides our audience into who are you? Are you a crypto enthusiast? Are you a business trying to build a Web3 app? Or you're a partner? So yeah, we're doing quite a lot of work there on our content side. Please do go check it out on YouTube and other places. We're working really hard there. So yeah, that's the kind of content stream. And now just to touch on the token, the Fuse Network token, Rob, give us a bit of an update here on exchanges and other things that people want to know about.
On the token side of things, just another point on the website there. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges, right? With when you're building an ecosystem, a blockchain ecosystem. If you're an e-commerce provider, you're selling shoes online, women's shoes, you've got one audience, which is women buying shoes, right? The website for a project like Fuse, especially a sort of wide-ranging project which has an entire ecosystem. On there, the personas can be your everyday token enthusiast. It can be an institutional investor, it can be a tech integrator, it can be a blue chip technology firm, it can be a small merchant looking to build it, to integrate a payment system. So there's the big challenge, and this is something we really want to double down on now, going into the next into the next year essentially, to really double down and improve that experience and really work on that experience for all of those different personas, prioritizing certain ones, of course, on the website. When it comes to, I know that we get lots of questions and maybe they'll come again at the end. When it comes to exchange listings, we don't, there's very little that we can communicate about it. To give you more insight, though, generally into how it works in the industry, it's important to understand there are many exchanges that have listed Fuse without our prior knowledge, right? They've just gone ahead and listed the token. And then they'll of course get in contact afterwards and say, hey, we've listed the token, you can share it, maybe be aware, maybe invite people to buy and sell there, etc. This can happen with large and small exchanges. There are of course others with which there's communication beforehand, and an agreement made beforehand with certain exchanges. Once again, they can be small and large, and there's different reasons why we would work with an exchange beforehand. One of them would be if they're going to integrate the Fuse network, right? If they're going to integrate the Fuse RPC, right, allowing people to actually offboard or off-ramp directly onto Fuse network. We are seeing good flows, by the way. We're seeing good flows with Gate.io when it comes to people on-ramping via Ethereum and then off-ramping onto Fuse in order to stake. And then Ascendex did the same thing recently, allowing people to off-ramp directly onto Fuse network. So that's something we're seeing great activity on. So yeah, that's all I'll say on exchanges for the moment.
Yeah, it's fine. Like that's obviously it's a question we get a lot of. People are interested as investors in the token and things like that. But ultimately, it's also about all the updates we're giving. They all feed into the token viability, don't they? That's what we're here. That's what we're trying to do. We're building a company, right? It's not just about the native token as well. So
the token is everything in the ecosystem. It's the thing that underlies the economy essentially on Fuse. So it's ultra important, and we're always happy to field questions about what's being done to improve the economy, essentially the token economy on Fuse, and therefore the strength of the token itself.
And in that, talking about
those, yeah. So I was just going to say, clarify. Robert made a point about ensuring the RPC is integrated in these different exchanges, and just to kind of de-jargon that's basically what allows Fuse mainnet native Fuse to be listed on these exchanges. But that's not just for the native token. That also opens the door for these exchanges for projects that are launched on Fuse. So the likes of people, when they come and launch the token, and these projects that are native Fuse projects also have a route to these mutual exchanges once the RPC is integrated, which is why we want to ensure that Fuse mainnet is available on these exchanges, because it's an important part of helping this ecosystem grow and the partners on board with it.
That's important information. Thank you, Carl. Like, that means as well that the Fuse, when the Fuse token goes, we take the whole ecosystem with us technically as well. So this is a nice point, I think. So yeah, thank you for adding that. Okay, and then just thinking about what we're talking about in terms of the long-term goals of Fuse and what we've done. So in the last community call with Mark, we were discussing a couple of proposals. So moving forward now, by 5-6 weeks, these proposals are in place. They've been voted on and they've gone through. So Rob, let's talk about some of the network updates. So we've got a couple of, go on. Tell us about these most recent updates.
Yeah, the big changes that happened, we pushed out a piece at the start of Q3 about the big Q3 upgrades that are coming to the network. The network requires attention in general, in terms of some technical debt, essentially, is the best way to describe it. Some of these changes that happened can best be described as technical debt. Increasing the block size was an important change to make, to ensure that we didn't, to ensure that we had the capacity essentially to handle the transactional flow we're seeing on the network, and to not be caught in a situation whereby we were experiencing congestion. The increasing Gas fees has also gone through, so we 10x'd the gas fee on Fuse from 1x, from 1 gwei to 10 gwei. It's major. It's not as major as some people think, because the fees are still ultra low on the network.
It's when you say 10x, right? People get a bit scared, but it's still under a cent as far as I'm aware. So it's 10x.
It's way under a cent. And obviously, as we grow and as the network grows, how do we continue to ensure that we keep those fees low? Well, we look at scaling solutions. And scaling solutions essentially allow us to bundle transactions and bundle them into one transaction, into one smart contract transaction, in order to ensure that we can continue to scale. And I would say that is the #1 priority. When you look at the different, when you're building a network like Fuse, you're building a blockchain like Fuse, you need to start off by saying, not what do we want to do, how do we want to build the network and develop the network moving forward, but what are the business goals?
Yeah.
And then you start to prioritize them. So one business goal for us, of course, is to replace Visa. And we're talking, in a 15, 20 year timeline, right? It's to really compete on a global scale and have a platform that allows us to process, to handle millions of merchants worldwide. So over the next sort of 10, 15 years or so, I'd say our #1 priority is going to be scalability. It's going to be the ability to handle that transactional flow. But then you look at other things. You look at things like privacy. You look at things like decentralization and governance, and ensuring that the network is governed in a way that is sustainable long-term. You look at various different sort of features on the network that make it easy for developers to build on the network. But I'd say the #1 thing that we focus on, the #1 sort of priority for us, is scalability. And that's the thing that we're focusing on, in particular for the research that's being done right now. We'll be looking to publish a paper. I can't say exactly when that's going to come, but it will be relatively soon, hopefully in sometime in Q4, on Fuse 2.0. So the next epoch, basically the next the future of Fuse network. In terms of the upgrades that are happening in Q3, so that FIP 12 and 13 have gone through. So the gas fee increase, the block size increase has gone through. Nethermind is underway. I'd say the other thing for people to get excited about is the unbounding period for staking. This is very important for people to understand, that we are integrating the change will make it so that currently, if you're staking Fuse, you can stake and unstake as many times as you want without any sort of waiting times. After this change is made, you'll have to wait 2 days, so 48 hours, in order to be able to unstake your Fuse. What that does is bring more economic stability to the network. It favors people who have a longer term view, it ensures a situation whereby you commit to the network by staking for at least 48 hours.
Got it. So it's future proofing. I mean, those two improvement proposals were basically to do with the future proofing of Fuse network, right, and getting us ready for what we expect to come soon. So I kind of think, in a nutshell, that's those. And you mentioned Nethermind there as well. Carl, do you want to jump into? There's a few more things we've got that's happening there. We spoke about the chain stack node infrastructure support. I think there's also something happening with the Fuse Chain Explorer, right?
Yeah, sure. So we just launched a bounty. So shout out to all the developers out there. There's a bounty open for the Fuse Chain Explorer to be upgraded. We're looking to add more features to that, right? So CSV download support, so for tax filings, real-time transaction tracking, probably increase like mempool archiving as well. Looking for those additional 720 and 721 token support. So that's going to happen. Just kind of hark back around FIP 12 and FIP 13. It's kind of interesting because FIP 12 is increasing the block size, right? So that should make the transactions faster and also a little bit cheaper. But FIP 13 comes in as well, and then we raised the gas price in accordance with that, still allowing a super cheap and fast network, but also reducing our vulnerability to kind of spam and attacks, because when you 10x it becomes a significantly more cost inhibitive activity to undertake. So it wasn't something that we were publicly discussing at the time, but it's something that we were aware of, and it's something that we wanted to take action against. And the team have got that through, and it's great to have that there. But you can see as well, there's the balance of you want to make the chain faster, but you want to also make it cheaper, but you also want to make sure that your chain's secure and protected. So that also drifts into going to Nethermine. So we're doing a Nethermine client upgrade for the nodes, and the reason behind that is that we actually were exploring moving on to Nethermine anyway. We felt like it was a more stable client for us, but actually as we were partway through that, Open Ethereum actually was deprecated, right? So there was no active Open Ethereum usage. So this allows us to work with a partner who's around for the long haul, who'll be there, and actually who we can develop. And we are trying to work on ways to develop a longer, more term kind of give and takes relationship with Nethermind with regards to that. So working urgently on that as well.
That's good. The other one that's kind of exciting at the moment as well is very early stage, but the Odin integration, Odin.ai. Just tell us a little bit about that, Carl, because I've done an AMA with them, but it's not out there yet. So what's Odin all about, and how does it help, basically? Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we don't really ever want to get into a situation like we had with Ola before, and with the issues that we had around that. So, Odin is an early stage startup that's going to be able to provide both insurance as it comes through, but also on-chain security. So they're going to be able to detect bad actors or malicious actors as they would go through, and be able to undertake the appropriate behavior. It's a tricky one, right? Because we obviously don't want to be too we don't want to have too much say about how things operate on the chain, as it were. But working with partners that feel as if that these are the right steps, it's in the open source nature, right? And we are an open source we are an open source network for all intents and purposes. So Odin brought their own particular twist to this, and I think it's super interesting that and it's something that's needed, right? It's something that's needed on the chain. I think so, yeah, definitely. All right, cool. So thank you very much, Carl, for that. So that's the kind of what we're doing on the tech side of things, how we changing our network. And
I just wanted to go back, actually. I just wanted to go back to partnerships as well a second, because I mentioned a few there and talked about real world and just generally in terms of how we provide real world solutions. I think not just that you hear it a lot in crypto in terms of decentralized identity, as that we say, but actually portable identity as well is another conversation in the real world as well. They're similar things, and we're recently working with a company called ChromePay that are going to be focused on in Africa on providing decentralized identities, or in this kind of context, to be able to advance the adoption for financial tools for the underserved communities out there. So how can farmers begin to leverage financial services or decentralized services in this context and be there? So they're doing some tremendous work out there, and they're a partner that we've worked with extensively and are launching on chain as well.
Yeah, nice. I mean, there's some very exciting things happening out there right now, and that's why another reason why we do these community calls is to kind of update, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So we're kind of making quite a lot of changes to how we do our community interaction and how we do our social media. We find that there's so much information that we need to put out there. It can be quite confusing for people, to catch everything that we're doing. In 1 month, we might do 20 integrations and so on and so on. So we've been doing a lot of work, not us three, actually. There's another chap that we have worked with us called Misha. He's been working extremely hard on our social side of things. So I'm just going to update you on some of the things that have been happening there. So improvements on community feedback channels. I mean, this is what this is. A community call is a feedback channel. And as I said at the beginning, you've got the opportunity to ask questions, and we are going to answer a bunch of those questions at the end. So little things like this that give people the opportunity to reach out to us, to have a conversation. We are humans. We are here to talk to you. So yeah. Forum updates as well. The Fuse forum, which is forum.fuse.io, is getting a bit of a revamp. It's got new sections, category, structure, and new rules as well that give it a bit of a new feel and allow for more easy navigation, to be honest. So that's coming in mid-September. And then we've kind of been categorizing news posts on our announcement channels to make it easier for people to see. So what I was saying was we have a lot of content. We're trying to create identity so that you see something and you think, right, that's an AMA, that's a piece of integration news, and so on. So we're still working on these things as we go along. And we also started using a lot more visual content and threads. So We understand that nobody really likes to read big, long articles. So we've been doing a lot more video content, and we've been doing a lot more Twitter threads, so you guys can just digest the information right there on Twitter. And more data-driven posts as well. One thing we have stepped our game up in is the data provision around Fuse Network and the dApps that operate there. So we'll be pushing out more information for the Fuse Network community to see how we're doing from a data perspective. And also just some little things that we're working on. Popes, we're going to be working on those for online events, AMAs and community calls. They'll be coming really soon, which means basically you can take digital memorabilia away from events like this. And as I mentioned earlier, education and the academy is coming soon. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming and a lot more information and sort of communication between us and our community. All right, so that's our kind of social media updates. So guys, thank you so much. We've been through the kind of our updates, what we wanted to talk about and what we wanted to inform people about. So now we've been collecting a bunch of questions in advance from members of our community on Telegram. So I'm going to go through a few of these. We have answered some of these already, so I'm going to skip past the ones that talk about token and things like that because we've spoken about that. So the first question, and this comes from a guy called Pablo, and Robert, I'm going to point this one at you. So he's saying, first, I want to know, he said, firstly, I absolutely support massive adoption of DeFi. That's a good start. So first, I want to know if you have already decided to reduce the inflation of Fuse, progressively decreasing its emission, as has been proposed before since a while ago. Rob. You're on mute, Rob.
There's a long forum thread on this, and it's a conversation that's been happening in the community for over a year.
Yeah.
Here's my opinion and the opinion of others within the foundation, because it's important to understand that this isn't a decision, right? It's not, hey, you decide. Yeah. It's a democratic process. Our opinion is that we should be targeting a 1% inflation rate long term. Currently, we're at 5%. There are things to consider here, right? You need to consider the competition. So right now, Fuse is very attractive. It's very it's very competitive in terms of the rate that you're getting, in terms of the APR that you're getting. So currently around 15%. Look at other networks. Well-known networks, you can look at things like, if you go to stakingrewards.com, then it might help you understand. Go to stakingrewards.com and check out the APRs that you can get with various different blockchain protocols. Polkadot, for example, is still around 15%. So it's good for us to remain competitive in the short term. But of course, we need to consider the benefits, essentially the economic benefits of reducing the inflation, therefore reducing the selling pressure, and the positive impact that can have. So it is our intention. I think it's the intention of most people within the community to reduce inflation over time. Our vision would be a 1% inflation rate. The question is when, essentially. The question is, when does that happen? We'll be coming back to this this subject. We're keen to speak to sort of key stakeholders within the community and look at when we can start to look at the first moves, right? When we go to 4%, for example, when it was 3%, or whether we outline the entire sort of roadmap of what the reduction in inflation looks like over a period of, let's say, 5 to 10 years. But yeah, it's not just us that makes the decision. It's the entire community. It's token holders.
Yeah, it's not so simplistic, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, but just to kind of frame the kind of stage of where this industry is as a whole, right? We're all still very early in this industry, right? We talk about mainstream adoption, but we're all still very early in this context. And the balance in reducing inflation is ensuring that we still have an attractive incentivization model for validators to secure the network and for delegators also to join that. If you look at the likes of Ethereum at the moment through their block rewards, for instance, the fees part of that, the fees for securing that network currently sit about 3.4% of that reward for miners actually within the Ethereum ecosystem. And so if that's sitting at 3.4%, it's a balance that we want to get to, right? We want to be attractive and incentive so people spin up infrastructure and support the network as they go through. But as it goes, inflation is it's one of those tricky things. It's actually very useful in attracting more people to the network, ensuring that more people can get involved and more people can have a piece of the network. But it also incentivizes people to help secure the network. And like Robert said, it's not just our decision. It's an open source network that's open to the community. So it's getting that balance right. But just to show you, like I say, for comparison, Ethereum obviously would probably like the fees to be more of the incentivization model for their for their stakeholders, but they're still only at 3.4%, and they're still growing as well. So that will come down as well. So everybody within this space is still, and Robert mentioned Polkadot as well. So everybody within this space is still trying to find ways to fund and fuel this kind of rapid growth and innovation, this hyper growth space, while also looking after those that come in at the same time.
All right, cool. Thank you, guys. Okay, so we've got a question about, and this is from somebody called iDiddy, and it is a question about the go-to-market strategy for Fuse Cash and Fuse Charge. So two separate things here. Robert, do you want to take that?
Important update concerning Fuse Cash, which is being deprecated in a sense. So the Voltage Finance DAO, and this is always the plan, was for Fuse Cash to be sort of gifted, if you like, by the foundation to the Voltage Finance DAO. So the foundation will stop developing Fuse Cash, and it will, moving forward, will be developed by the Voltage DAO. So it's going to be called Volt App. This is information that came out recently from the Voltage Finance community, and the big, it's on the Voltage DAO basically to develop that, but the big focus there is on, DeFi in your pocket, basically. So really targeting that audience of people that want to be able to do DeFi using a mobile app and with a really simple interface. So, zero fees, being able to swap in app and be able to access sort of exotic app assets within a mobile app, being able to on-ramp very easily. So that's, it's something that we'll develop moving forward within the Voltage Finance community. Concerning Fuse Charge, we are a very product, the culture of Fuse is very product. So whilst we like to come up with, business decks and whatnot to decide what the future of Fuse Charge looks like, ultimately it's about constantly looking for product market fit and where the best, what the ideal audience for that is. Ultimately, it's a platform. The key metric we'll be looking at is the number of API calls, right? The number of merchants that are using it and the number of transactions they're doing. Essentially, there can be different types of transactions. But a key focus for us is small businesses. Basically, you target two audiences. You target everyday developers that can play around with Fuse Charge and try and do stuff. They can integrate a client into a wallet, or they can integrate a widget into an e-commerce website, and they can play around with the technology and constantly be in contact with our development team to ask for features and APIs, etc. And then you look at merchants and how they can be leveraging for Fuse Charge. But ultimately, it comes down to continuing to look for product market fit. This is still relatively new. So the go-to-market is very strong communication between the team that's building that and the people that want to use it, and constantly looking for ways to serve their needs, basically.
Yeah. And in a nutshell, we're still figuring out the go-to-market strategy because we're still placing the product within the market, right? So that question is a little bit premature, actually, and perhaps in another couple of months' time, if you ask that question.
I would encourage anybody that's interested to go to chargeweb3.com and to check out the documentation, because the documentation is the product essentially. Because this is how these products develop. It's about that's the means of communication between the team that's building it and trying to serve the needs of merchants and developers, and obviously the businesses themselves. So check out that documentation, and please reach out if you've got questions. And we're keen to understand what people want, what kind of APIs people want, etc.
Okay, cool. So moving on. A quick question about.
Sorry, can I just add to kind of Charge as a whole as well, and in terms of what the network is doing in order to support that as we go through. So just to give some hard numbers, right? That there's a report, I think it's by one of the big four, McKinsey or Bain or someone like that, where they've looked at the kind of payments opportunity amongst small medium businesses, so businesses kind of taking over 100K revenue over the next 5 years, and there's a $100 billion opportunity in there, right? And I think that often, as we've gone before, we always look at this as how do we solve the payments problem? And we always think about payments as fees, charges, and things that come around that. If you're looking at the addressable wallets of those businesses, and especially with the kind of tooling that we're putting on board, that's only around 4% of their addressable wallet spend. And there's like a bigger chunk of that, I think up to 24, 28%, around invoicing services, for instance, or software and value-added services, treasury services, issuing services, these kind of things that are also attachable. And the network that we're building at the moment in terms of that open source infrastructure supports projects like Request Network for your invoicing over crypto in a more, and for payroll as well. But also we have Bula Network that also help out with payments. We're looking to add more e-commerce payments providers as we go through. Indexing services like on Marshall will go live soon, where they can begin to make those SLAs that are required for the kind of tier one e-commerce payments that we go through. And where charge plays into that, I use the example, and I'll caveat that example, but I use the example of Linux. And if you think about Ubuntu as that open source part of Linux, and actually Red Hat as a service that's been delivered on top of it. Granted, Red Hat is more of a support services kind of business, whereas actually if you look at Charge is going to look to help those businesses kind of grow and make it easier for them to take away some of that complexity, help them bootstrap the blockchain a bit, but still derive all that lightness and all that benefit of being able to use a blockchain to kind of execute those payments and offer other strategies. So Charge, they have a number of different use cases ranging from the B2C to the B2B businesses. But the network itself also plays into that part to kind of make those two synergistic things grow together.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
And that's also to say, just to hark back as well about the open source nature of the network. That's not to say that anybody can launch their own product that delivers similar services on the chain. This is the beauty of it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So moving forward, we've got a bunch of questions actually that came from our DAO leader. And these are important questions. So I want to dive into each one of these as we go through. They're quite, we've got quite a few here. Okay. So we've already covered the team's long-term tokenomics view for Fuse. So we'll leave that one alone. Any staking target? So are there any target staking APYs the team would like to meet? I think we've covered that. We've discussed it. Low inflation rate. We've covered that too. Does increasing the base gas cost, sorry guys, does increasing the base gas cost influence the required network inflation rate with validators earning more fees from transactions? Who wants to
I think actually to just touch upon that, we just discussed around the Ethereum example of meet 3.4% of total fees, and this will go through. Yes, so it definitely is a case where it will influence how we make those decisions and ensure that people are requisitely incentivized to utilize Fuse network.
Here's how it works. Validators and anyone who's helping secure the network, they get paid by two ways. One is rewards. The second one is fees. Right now, on most blockchains, including Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's mostly rewards. Over time, you want the ratio to come down. So currently the ratio on Ethereum, and it depends where the market is, but right now, I haven't looked today, but currently the ratio is around 3%. So it's 97% rewards, therefore inflation, and 3% fees. What you want to see is that graph going up. You want to see the fees playing a much larger part. And of course, that is an important thing on Fuse. We're looking to get the, we should publish the data on that at some point soon. So we've got clear data on how that's working for Fuse network. But of course, over time, if a network isn't increasing the ratio fees over rewards, then it's not doing its job properly. So that is very much our objective. It's a very clear metric and goal for us to increase the ratio of fees over rewards.
All right, cool. And a lot of those questions, again, were to do with how have we improved our tech. We've covered all of those things, Rob. So, sorry, Rob from the DAO. So thank you for your questions. They are really much appreciated. And I think we've covered all of those in our chat as well. Okay, so we've got another couple of questions that have come through from a guy called Supportive Pingu, which I quite like his name. Big question. So listen up, guys. We're going to dive into this one first, okay? So an area I find lacking in DeFi is on and off ramping of fiat. Financially, it is more feasible for me to go through a centralized exchange to onboard fiat than it is to go through the Fuse Cash app, with the cost difference being around 50%. Does Fuse Network have any plans trying to tackle this issue, not just providing on-off ramping for the network users, but the crypto world in general? This is quite a big question. This is like, are you planning to tackle adoption from that perspective as a whole, or are you planning to tackle it through Fuse-specific ideas? And he's saying, in my opinion, if Fuse was the network everyone thought of first for fiat transactions, volume, and usage, the network would skyrocket. So what do you guys think about this? So it's fiat onboarding and tackling the bigger issue.
Yeah, I don't disagree with him in this context. And actually, look, it is something that we've been doing quite. So, we have a number of different partners that work through that. So we have Ramp, we have Transact, we have Xample that exist. But actually, part of the kind of product development that we're looking at, and we're thinking about this, and I think the way that we look at it is called money mobility, right? How does this money flow? We talked about e-commerce and we talked about different opportunities. We've spoken to projects, for instance, that want to, I refer to real world projects that want to be in a situation where they can create tokens for their business. Think like, I don't know, think like a bowling alley where you buy the tickets and this kind of thing, right? There's definitely a desire out there for those kind of things. And I think that the default at the moment is, if you look at like kind of centralized gaming or however you want to put it, they use things like PlayFab to just kind of give these throwaway bucks, right? And these things. But there's a desire from these businesses to give a little bit more to their customers to bring those things through and say, okay, can we have a floating value currency within our business that people could utilize and use for different things like F&B or these kind of things. That, of course, it comes with its own problems, right? Because not everybody that turns up to your business and walks in is going to have a Fuse wallet waiting ready to kind of make these payments. Yeah. So mapping out exactly the kind of touch points that we have from a fiat on and off ramping perspective, making sure that we have the right touch points there, but then also making that intuitive. So, for instance, to have interaction points where people can use their card. Let's say they just come in and they use their card on a machine, and actually they get the tokens that are required to operate this thing, but they're none the wiser. It operates like a normal world real thing. It's definitely something that we're trying to get done, and I agree it's very expensive still to. And this is why I wanted to extrapolate as well. Expand upon the idea of payments as a whole. The cost of payments, the charge of payments, being a very small part of that business, because Pengu's right, that cost it doesn't make sense. But there's a whole value-added services, and then as that becomes more ubiquitous and the barriers come down, then we'll really see the benefit of those lower payments as well, lower charge payments.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good question as well. And it's something that everybody's trying to tackle, but you're right. And I agree also that it would be, I'm waiting for the time where I can walk into a place and use a card to use my stable coins, for example, and I don't have to think about it. And I think that's where we're trying to get to, isn't it? Right. So another question from the same person. So one of the main goals of Fuse Network, as they understand it, is to give communities the ability to create their own financial system. So Pengu, you've understood perfectly. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And you've put this into practice, guys, in the past in a festival over in, I think it was in Thailand, right? You had a festival and they were using POS devices and they were transacting. And I think they did $1 million in total across the time of the festival. So this person is asking, why are you not doing more? How come we're not trying to roll this technology out into the Olympics, into the football, into different scale, and to scale up on this idea of which we had a good one at the beginning. So yeah, I don't know who wants to field this one. Rob, maybe you.
It's it's the ongoing challenge of bringing about real world adoption. So important thing to understand with the Mystic Valley Festival, that was implemented by one of our key partners, Bitaza, down in Bangkok, down in Thailand. There's a lot happening there that you don't necessarily see. So the latest sort of development with Bitaza is the creation of what's called the Freedom Wallet, which interestingly, their vision sort of sits in with the early vision of Fuse, which is that you have one wallet and you're able to create different communities. Essentially, different businesses can use the same wallet. They can all download the same wallet from the App Store, They can go in, they can customize it. So whether you're a festival or you are a ferry service, this is an example of one of the things that Bitaza are doing, is a ferry service down in Thailand that takes people back and forth from a certain island, and there's rewards and loyalty points they're able to get access to. Whether you're doing an event, you might be doing a 3,000 person pool party or something. Yeah. It's a very simple integration. You're able to go into the wallets and create your business, your community essentially, and you don't need to go through all the development sort of all the hurdles required to build your own wallet. So Bitaza is a key integrator and a key partner for Fuse. People is the same thing, so it's important to understand how people are developing. It's the same thing. There's not only the people food delivery business, there's also multiple other things happening. There's the local shopping app with Shocal, SHOCAL, if you want to check it out. There's the Guide Liverpool, which is a local publication essentially that gives people access to what would you call them? Offers essentially locally, and then they're generally developing the same thing. They do in fact do custom wallet builds for the different businesses that want to leverage the people network, and in this case, they're using the people token. Right, so there's different business models being used by the different partners we're working with. There are also other important partnerships in the pipeline, which we can't necessarily talk about. So one big blue chip technology provider that we are currently speaking to, but this will come. This will come in the form of a press release. The news will come in the form of a press release in the next. Well, we'll see when it comes, but hopefully in probably not before the end of September, but in October, November. So there's obviously something behind the scenes. And
that's an important point, Rob, isn't it? That it's Bitaza who are actually initiating these developments, and people are looking at Fuse as if we're doing it, but it's
finding the balance, right? If a I'll give another example. If a beach club in Ibiza that has that's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue come to Fuse and say, hey, can you build us a payments and reward system? And we don't immediately have an integrator for them, then do we say, well, this is a great use case for Fuse, and therefore let's go ahead and do it ourselves, or do we pass on the opportunity? The chances are, in that case, we're probably going to deploy resources and take the opportunity, but we really need to look at how we can do this in a way that's sustainable. Early on with Fuse, anything that came along, anyone that wanted to build something, we'd throw our developers at them, and we'd start building a wallet. And now, as the business grows, and as we become more sort of KPI and metric driven, and we need to focus more on how we're deploying resources, we operate a little bit differently. But the integrators play a very important part for us. These businesses that are building these business models play a very important part for Fuse and for the Charge platform.
Yeah, it's a very important nuance there, I think, of that information as well, that it's about Bitaza and Fuse and how those relationships come together. And again, it's why we're doing calls like this, is so that people can better understand those relationships, because it's not easy, you have to read between the lines, right? So, okay, so we got another couple of questions. This guy was dedicated. I'm going to give him big props for his questions. There's many questions here. So, developments on Fuse seem to be happening at an incredible rate. That's nice. He always starts with a positive. He's clever, this guy. Sometimes it seems hard to keep up. After one of the network announcements recently, it is clear that Fuse will be building and preparing for the B2B market. At what point will Fuse start going after some of that market? Building infrastructure is important, but that does not onboard companies that are unfamiliar with blockchain technology. How can you onboard companies unfamiliar with blockchain technology? We've touched on this. We're talking about Charge. We're talking about other things, but guys, maybe one of you wants to give a direct answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, we can just further speak about what Robert had said before, right? So think about, let's use the example of the Olympics. Did we not mention that we did the Olympics in France? Obviously we didn't, but let's think about the Olympics in France as an example. the Olympics body themselves will have a number of different partners that they operate with, partners that are verified on their procurement books and everything else. They'll go through that. So that there's already this active bunch of networks that are going to be there, not networks, sorry, but integrators, resellers, partners.
It's not so easy to just become the new provider, right? It's not that simple.
And that's fine, and that makes sense. And from an expansion perspective, if you think, like Robert said before, we throw resources at it, and that's not incredibly sustainable in order to do so, because you can't do that. So I actually come from a channel management background, right, and kind of looking at these kind of things. So if you think about in this instance, if you think about Fuse as Apple. Let's think of it as an Apple. We don't manufacture the same thing. Well, getting there, but we don't manufacture the same things. But Apple are the manufacturer / OEM of these things, and Apple have multiple routes to the end user, the end client, as they go through. So they can buy directly off the Apple website. You can buy it through there. They can buy it through John Lewis or MediaMarkt or whoever it is that resells it in there. But they also can buy those products from distributors as well that sit in between those things. And then there are business to business services where you have certified reseller solutions, certified resellers of those solutions, and these kind of things. So it's quite complex in the way that these things go to market. But what's important for us is that we expand in a way that we incorporate more partners that exist within those networks. So we incorporate and speak to partners who are out there hunting, who know how to get the correct opportunities here. Partners who are either experts already in leveraging legacy financial systems directly and are looking to expand it into a kind of operate Web3 opportunities, like in terms of those local economies as such to an extent, or business economies as it were. Those are the ones who want to expand there as well, or even businesses that sit in the middle that help those businesses leverage microservices. So they provide these microservices, and again, another simplification of those APIs. So you can always imagine, to an extent, you'll have the network that exists and charges building another product, and then they integrate with another specialist in a different area that's a business to business, and that specialist helps all of these different integrators integrate across all these different B2B services. So we're trying to build that out right now, right? We're trying to make sure, and charge is a big part of that, making sure that we have that simplicity of tools. I mean, I'd mentioned it before to you guys in private, but that Jeff from Twilio, he always, when they were trying to come up with their slogan, they were trying to explain, how do you explain Twilio on a billboard, right? They're sitting there for hours trying to work out and spending a stupid amount of money on the advertisement as well. And then in the end, it just became down to that point where it's ask a developer, right? Twilio ask a developer. And it's a very similar context in terms of that's the community we want to get to. We want to make developers' lives easier, and we want to give them options to be more flexible and provide better services as they go through.
That's it, right? And it's an interesting example you gave there about Apple as a company. I think it's an interesting case where you think, for me, the way I think is that a blockchain can be as successful as the applications that run atop it. That's kind of how I feel about things. And personally, I don't think the Apple iPhone was the big invention. Angry Birds was the reason the Apple iPhone became so big. Without the apps on those devices, they are useless devices. Let's be real, right? And a blockchain is fairly irrelevant without any dApps. So building out the infrastructure to allow the development of real-world projects is exactly what we're here trying to do. On other networks, you see this rush towards any dApp, anything, any old thing can launch here, but this is short-term gain, and that's not really. We're not here for a short time. We're here for a long time, and to succeed. So it's different objectives that we have, and I do state it quite often that Fuse is a unique network in that sense. Shouldn't think we have a laser focus, whereas other networks tend not to so much. It's a different proposition. So thank you very much, gentlemen. You've done an amazing job. It's not easy to sit here with me and answer all these questions. So thank you so much, guys. That was it from our community call, guys. So thank you so much for joining in. Yeah, we're going to do this once a month. So what we want to do is feedback everything that we get up to, and also take feedback from you guys and answer your questions. As you can see, people have questions. They want to know these things, so we need to address it. So that's why we do this, and that's why we'll continue to do this. So thank you to these two fine, upstanding gentlemen. I will wish them a farewell and have a great day. Maybe a final word from you two guys?
Thank you, Ian.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us here today. Yeah, if you have any other questions, we have the Telegram chat set up. Fire them in on the next community call. We'll take care of all the questions there. All right? So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.